Welcome back to Tiny Grimes Games, and I'm here with another Star Wars Destiny video. And today, I'm going to talk about a problem that we're having locally in SoCal, and that in talks with other people across the country they're having, and that is not that the game is dying. The game is not dying. The game is doing fine. But that it is shrinking, and that people are becoming disillusioned. And so what I want to talk about today is why I think this is happening, and what, if anything, we can do to stop it. So let me start here, though. This is going to be a subjective video. I'm of the opinion that the game is not quite going the direction I personally would like to see it go. You may disagree with me fervently. You may say, I love when people go fast hands into force speed, into vibro knife, unblockable damage. That is the game I love. And if that's the game you love, then I'm sorry, I just disagree with you. I don't love that type of Destiny. I like more of what we saw mostly with Set 1 Destiny. If you remember, Jango Fett was the monster cheater. He was the guy who was working around the framework of the game, and it took people a little while to get used to him, and it was still kind of like, ooh, he's really pushing the edges. Now we look back at Jango and we're like, ha! He's unplayable. No one plays Jango. Oh my goodness. It's just amazing to think about how far this game has been pushed in that direction. Like I said, you may love that direction, and if you do, awesome. I'm happy for you. I'm of the opinion that that direction is not great. But I want to talk about something else first before we get there, and that is just sort of what has happened to our community during Store Championship season, and I'm curious if this has happened around the country. I know it's happened to other people I know of, and that is basically that with Store Championship season, I feel like almost like the harsh reality of what Destiny really is has come crashing down upon our community. We have so many Store Championships that it's basically 1 to 2 every weekend. So every weekend there is a big event, and it's so much fun, and everyone comes out or has been coming out. But the problem seems to be that Destiny is a skill-based game, and I think some of the more casual players who think of themselves as really good players are getting a bit of a wake-up call and seeing more of the skill gap, and that can be frustrating. And I think what's exacerbating this is if, like, you're just playing at the store and you sit down from someone and they show you their deck and it doesn't look all that optimized, I'm not going to bust out a Pomaz deck or some other deck that I consider to be way over the curve. I'm going to pull out a tier 2 deck, maybe even a tier 3 deck. Maybe I get this idea bouncing around that's not quite fully formed yet, and I pull that out, and we're able to have a fun game where there's a lot of back and forth. And I think one of the issues we're seeing is that there are a lot of casual players who love Star Wars Destiny, and they're getting pounded on by decks that they are not having fun playing against. It's not that fun playing against Pomaz. It's not that fun playing against a finely tuned Palpatine deck every game if you're not ready for it, right? If you don't play a lot of removal because you don't like to, because that's how you play Destiny, then Palpatine is going to destroy you. And so on the list goes. Rey doing a whole turn before you do anything. These become exacerbated, I think, in a Store Championship environment where you really see, whoa, everyone is so serious all of a sudden. What happened? And I think that's been kind of a problem for our community. Also, the tournament structure itself has been extremely problematic because we have such a big group, and we're always in like the 30s. The 30s is in a horrible place to be. I think the FFG tournament rules work generally well for sort of smaller groups and bigger groups, like if you can get the mid 40s. But when you're in the high 30s, you end up having a lot of and ones that are vying for 4 spots, and inevitably somebody's upset because it feels bad. So for example, we had a tournament with 37, which is a terrible number. There were like 8 people that were on the bubble, right? All and ones, and 2 people who were 4-0 going into the last round did not make it at 5-1. It wasn't because they lost to a great player at the end. It was probably because in round 1 they randomly got paired up with someone. That person went 0-2 drop. Their strength of schedule is blown to bits. Now they have to go 5-0. And I think with the way this tournament structure is set up, it just a lot of people have bad tastes in their mouth because it all comes down to strength of schedule. One store calculated it wrong, and so then a bunch of and ones that should have been in weren't in. But if there'd just been another round in the first place, this wouldn't have happened. There wouldn't be so many and ones. So I think that's a part of it. And then what makes it worse, you work hard the whole tournament, you're in the top 4, and I'm one of the people who said this game does not function well as a best of 3, but this was back when Destiny games took a little while. Now that they're 8-minute games, you could do a best of 5 really easily, actually. But the best of 1 is not working in a system where something like Pol Maz is very prevalent, because it's not that Pol Maz is this broken, unbeatable deck, not by any stretch, but it's more that it has this ceiling that is so high that 1 out of every, say, 4 or 5 games, it automatically wins the game, period. I had an example of this happen to me over the weekend where I make it to the finals, I've had a long day, it's been going great. In the first 2 turns, my opponent sees 2 hit and runs, 2 thermal detonators, a fast hands. Turn 3 is like rocket launcher, 2 planetary uprisings. That's the game. I'm running a 3-character deck. In the first 2 turns, he did something like 22 damage. And I was like, okay, well, I can't win this game. Like, I just literally can't win this game. And in a best of 3, you're like, okay, I'll give you 1. You got the 1 game where you got double thermal. And, like, there's no real way to combat that, right? Like, if your deck loses to double thermal turn 1 and turn 2, well, most decks do, right? I'm running a lot of removal. That wasn't the problem. It wasn't that it was an ill-constructed deck on my part. They just ran into the nut draw. And I think best of 3 would help with that. I really do. And barring that, a double elimination. Some way so it's just like, oh, my opponent nut drew me, or I just rolled all blanks. I rolled all blanks for 3 turns and I lost, and that was the game. It's just really hard in a dice / card game to say best of 1 for all the marbles. And so I think what it comes down to is basically FFG trying to juggle this weird thing where they're like, it's Store Championships, it's kind of casual. That doesn't work, though. It's like, it's either casual, and it's like league play and people play fun decks, or it's a tournament system where people bring the best decks and are disappointed when they play a whole day just to get bounced on either being an and 1 and having their turn 1 opponent drop, or having a worst case scenario. So I think the first step to fixing what we're seeing in our community, at least, is people leaving and the threat of everyone leaving. Like, there's this looming cloud over a community after every store champ. People are like, oh, this game might leave, and it's just like, oh, don't say that. No one else say that. It's too scary. So I think fixing the tournament structure will help. Another thing is really promoting league play. We haven't seen this. We have these, these quarterly kits that are set up for tournaments. I think they need to set things up more for league play and have, guides for stores on how to run a league, because leagues are what really bring people together. I feel like tournaments is separating the cream of the crop from the rest of the crew, and that can be fine on an, occasionally, but I think casual players don't really enjoy that much. Like, how fun is that? Like, I'm going to go to the store and get my butt kicked again by a deck that I hate playing against. Great. Like, that's not that fun. Okay, so that's the first half, is fixing the tournament structure. The second half, and again, this is where it gets really subjective, is I feel like, and most of the people I know feel like, the game has kind of gotten out of control. And that's very scary that we're in set 2. The people are like, whoa, the game's got out of control. And what I mean is, in regards to taking extra actions and sort of violating the principles of the game. So let me give a couple caveats, because these are very fair points. There are always best cards in the game. That's just how games work, and I'm totally fine with that. I am not saying that the card pool needs to be perfectly balanced where there is not a better card. That is not at all what I'm saying. What I'm saying is there is a framework of this game. I take an action, you take an action. When you obliterate that framework, are we really even playing the same game anymore? Right? Like, a good example of this, of this action cheating working well, is Tactical Mastery. I paid $1. I got to do 1 time this thing where I took 2 actions, and it was really surprising, and it took you off guard, and you had a plan, and this messed up your plan, or you could kind of sniff it out, and you've been playing around it. But the point is, it is a one-off, 1 extra action moment. That's great. Tusken Raider is another good example of this, where it can be frustrating, don't get me wrong, but there's a cost. You have to discard a card. It is, just when he rolls in, it's the one time. It is 1 die. It has to be his die. So you have to put stuff on a fragile dude, right? And it only works with a couple decks. Like if you go Tusken Raider and 2 other cruddy guys and load up your Tusken, he's a dead Tusken. Those kind of action cheating are great. I think they're needed for the game. I think it's a great point. People have said, Tiny, if you take away the action cheating, then it's just this boring back and forth. And I totally agree. My point is not that there should be no action cheating, but that it needs to be reined in. And the big thing for me is repeatable. I do not think there should be repeatable free action cheating. I think that's where we get into these huge problems. So let's go ahead and take a look at these at a couple cards. The first one, to me, the biggest offender is probably Fast Hands. We just talked about Tactical Mastery, which costs 1 to do it once. Fast Hands costs 0 to do it infinitely. To me, that is just not a good design avenue. I do like the idea, right, that now you can run, say it was blue, and you could run a Palpatine that's so vulnerable to removal and say, look, I at least get to do 1, right? Like, I understand the design perspective, like the thought process, but it just leads to such a degenerate game where suddenly now you just don't have to care as much about what's happening. You just roll something out, and you automatically get to do it. And it just breaks the framework of the game. So what I would want to see Fast Hands become, I don't even really want it to be 1 cost or 2 costs. I think the problem still remains. In the right deck, it would be worth 1 or 2. Definitely 1. My God, how this is 0 just blows my mind. It would go in every deck at 1. But I would rather it was something like discard it, right? It's like Tactical Mastery. You get it 1 time. And now, maybe you run Starship Graveyard, and you're looping this sucker every turn, and your opponent's like, bah, that's not fair, man. I have to claim early just to stop you from that action cheat, and there's strategy and back and forth, and you're trying to outthink your opponent. That would be phenomenal. Could be top of the deck. I don't know. My whole point is repeatable is when we run into problems. It's not that Fast Hands lets you roll out and resolve. That is not the problem. The problem is, for the rest of the game, it doesn't. And it's not even the cost. The cost is, like I said, 1, it would still be all over the place. I even think people would play it in certain decks at 2. Poe doesn't actually care that much about his money. He could pay 2 on 1 turn to put a Fast Hands down. It probably still would see play. So that would be mine. I would probably say discard it. It's a one-off. You discard it. You can bring it back and loop it all day if you want. That's something you could do. You could play cheat, bring it back. There's plenty of ways to bring it back. You have to invest. You're re-upping your investment every time you want to use this. And to me, that's totally fine. I'm on board with any type of thing where you're reinvesting. So next up is Rey. Rey is the similar problem. Rey is kind of a bigger problem than Fast Hands. Fast Hands feels like such a big problem because it goes in so many decks. But Rey's ability is insane. It just really is crazy. It has so many problems, right? It's not just that it's repeatable, but it's stackable on top of that. So it's so frustrating to play against. I was playing a Rey Qui-Gon deck yesterday. I was just doing the stupidest things. I have a Force Speed on Rey, and so I'm like, all right, I'll put a Vibro Knife on her. I'll roll her. Cool, hit the Force Speed. I'll resolve that. I'll do a couple more, or I'll Vibro Knife into Vibro Knife. Just like the crazy action stacking you can do with Rey. It just feels bad for your opponent. It does not feel like you are playing Destiny. Now, I will say, right now, at this very moment, I don't feel like there's a Rey deck where I'm like, oh, it's breaking the game. But that's not the point of this video. It's not that Ray breaks the game, or really that any of these particular cards by themselves break the game. It's that they violate the principles of the game so much so that it feels like, what game are we playing? We're not really playing Destiny anymore. Like, you took your whole turn and claimed, I have yet to roll out. What are we doing here? This is not Destiny. This is something different. And maybe it's still fun, but it's not the game that we all fell in love with. And this is a problem that was existing in Awakenings, but because there were so few ambush cards, it was more of like a skill-based play, right? Like, okay, they got the holdout blaster, dang it, and they overrode it, and so now I have to decide, am I going to give up a die to claim to stop them from this turn or not? And it's a decision point, and that's why people didn't have that much of a problem with Ray, because you could kind of play around her. It was a cat and mouse game, but in set 2, we get another ambush weapon in the Vibro Knife, which we'll get to. But we're going to see even more every set. It's just going to become this problem that only grows over time and puts this huge dampening ability on the design team of what they can actually do. So I think my solution is going to be it's a really polarizing one. I don't think anyone's going to like it but me. So one of the things that FFG has done in the past is to put just to basically slap limit once per turn on everything like this. Any ability like this usually says limit once per turn in Game of Thrones and in most other FFG games. I'm kind of surprised Destiny hasn't gone this route yet. But I think at a minimum, obviously, this should be limit once per turn. You still get repeatable action cheating, though, and that's kind of the whole point of this video is I don't like repeatable action cheating. So here's my proposal. It says if your first action on a turn is to play an upgrade, blah, blah, blah. In other words, it is repeatable, it is every turn, but it's only once per turn, and it's actually only if it's your very first action. So this way, you can't set up and craft this whole thing where you like roll the other guy, then you do your trick to re-roll Ray and to re-roll the other guy and then smash him for 1,000. It's much more predictable and handleable. Okay, they didn't do it out of the gate? All right, I'm good to go. Or they did do it out of the gate, and now that's over with for the turn. They got their cheat. Now we can actually play Destiny. I have a feeling people won't like that, and they'll just want it to be once per turn. What I've heard is, oh, that limits her power too much. Dude, she's a 9/12 for 10 with the sickest ability in the game. I don't think she needs to be that great. I actually wouldn't mind a day where Ray didn't go in literally every single hero deck that was ever made unless Maz is in it. So I want to limit Ray substantially. I think it'll help the design team. You have to imagine that every card ever made that's a hero character, people go, but what about Ray? But what about Ray, man? That'd be broken with Ray. And you're like, oh, you're right. Everything's broken with Ray. Let's just fix Ray. Let's just fix Ray now and give the design team the ability to design hero cards that are good. I mean, look at the first 2 sets. You're like, yes, there's Ray, and there's Maz, and Poe seems pretty good. Luke's kind of blah. Obi's alright. Like, where are the good... Where's the FN? Where's the Jabba? Where's the Unkar? You can't do that because you got Ray, and Ray limits design space so much. So let's just nuke her a bit and move on. Alright, this next card, I hate to say it. I love Nines so much. He's by far my favorite card. But he's busted. Like, the dude's flat busted. He's got good dice. I used to think Ray's ability was the best in the game. It's not. Nines is just absurdly good. It's, again, it's what I said. It's repeatable action cheating. Scariest part, he only gets better. The dude is 10 cost, 11 health, and gets to take 1,000,000 actions a turn. I mean, I had a game last night, someone went, and this is not that weird. They went like, holdout blaster, ambush, overwrite holdout blaster, overwrite vibro knife, overwrite knucklers, overwrite flamethrower. Okay. Now when it's my action, I'll roll 9s, and I've rolled like, 5 times now. I think you just put the typical FFG stamp on him, limit once per turn. It's still a great ability. You still get basically a Tusken Raider ability without discarding Then you get to roll the dude for 1 more than the Tusken Raider is, and 3 more health. Like, 9s is sickeningly good. I think the only reason people haven't stumbled upon how absurdly busted he is because the Poe Maz thing seems so over the top that when 9s does his thing, the 9s player, when his opponent starts complaining, goes, hey man, at least it's not Poe Maz. And then the opponent's like, you're right, it's my bad, please don't break your Poe Maz deck out. I will take this level of action cheating over that any day. But I'm telling you, 9s is really good. And I can't even imagine what's going to happen when there's more weapons that are better. Because right now, you got to play stuff like Flamethrower, which only has 2 damage sides, the IQA, which only has 2 sides. And man, when there's more Vibro Knuckles, Vibro Blades, Riot Batons, all Vibro Knives, all these things, when there's more stuff like that, with Redeploy especially, woo, this guy's going to get out of control super fast, and he really restricts, I think, design of what future weapons can look like. I think you just slap the limit 1 on him, move on, and you're happy with your day. Shouldn't be any surprise here if I'm going to talk about repeatable action cheating. Maz Kanata. She's almost the poster child right now because of the Poe deck. I mean, she's insane. You get to activate 2 dice, which means basically what her text often reads if you're running the Elite version is choose any die in your pool and turn to whatever side you want and resolve it. And that's too strong. That's just too strong on a character that only costs 811. It's too strong. It's the Tusken Raider only a billion times better. Tusken Raider has to discard to do his trick. She does not. The Tusken Raider can only do his own die. She can do whatever she wants. She is just too strong. I think an easy way to limit her is just resolve 1 die. Now she basically becomes the Tusken Raider, right? So you can put cool stuff on her, take that chance, right? Is that how I need to do this? Like, I've got this thing that I need to be able to resolve, so I'm going to put it on her, so when I roll her, boom, I can resolve that die. She's actually still better than the Tusken Raider with limiting her to 1 die, with saying resolve up to 1 die. So the only way she's not, though, is she doesn't have the amazing side. She has to do it with a weapon or with something else, but she's still more flexible, that she can hit someone else's dice if you have some sort of weird scenario happening. But I think she's just too good. I do think if you say maybe resolve up to 1 die, she's not that good anymore, and she's not really going to see much play. But it's just too good. You can't have repeatably every single turn, flip a die to whatever side you want on the board and resolve it. That's too much. It's just too much. This is what I'm talking about. These repeatable action cheats, it's just too much. All right, let's go to Poe. Poe's on the edge to me. Maybe he's okay. If we got rid of all the things I've been talking about, Maz got neutered and Fast Hands got neutered, I think Poe's probably fine. I still wouldn't mind if we just switched him to, say, vehicle only. I mean, we're going to get there at a point anyway when he's got 700 choices and we're 6 sets down the line. I would have no problem just changing him to vehicle. I'd probably be fine with him staying as is, but vehicle I think would be a fine change. So, no video about problematic cards that I make would be complete without addressing the Sith Holocron. I've been beating this drum since the first moment I saw this card. The first time I ever loaded TTS and played a game on it and used the Sith Holocron, I said, wow, this card really violates the principles of the game. And I've been saying since that moment, it should just say discard. It's the same thing with Fast Hands, that same sort of situation. But this is even better. Like, you still can go, I'll get a 4 resource swing and turn this into a Mind Probe. It's still insane to use once. The fact that you get to use this multiple times is one of the more absurd design choices I've seen. Again, I'm not saying it breaks the game. It's just an absurd design choice. So I think if you made a discard, it would still be 2 in every villain deck because you would still get a massive swing. Oh, I only got 1 Force Lightning from my Holocron? That wasn't even worth it. I don't think you'd ever hear that. I really don't. I think once is fine. It discards. If you really want to exploit this, fine. Run the graveyard. Loop that bad boy. That's cool. That's a cool idea. I love it. In fact, make a fast hands Holocron loop in the graveyard deck. I think that could be really strong. Make it a cost, right? My point is, with all these action cheatings, there needs to be some cost as part of it, right? And making them all free and repeatable it just takes the game in a different direction. The last action cheating card that I have a big problem with, and this one is much less so, is Force Speed. Force Speed is, again, repeatable, and that's my only problem. It actually turns out that it's not nearly as problematic as the other stuff because it has a cost. You have to roll that side, right? The die sits there. You have a chance to get rid of it. It's only 2 more actions. They have to work to make it happen. Like with Holocron, you can make the same argument, except it's not 2 more actions you get. It's a 4-cost thing you get that is totally amazing. This is just 2 actions. Though I will say, I really don't even like the idea of 0-cost dice, period. I think every die card should cost $1. I just think that's how the game is made. There are a lot of really bad cards that cost $1. I think that's how it should be, unless the die really does nothing. If it's like 3 blanks and a shield, maybe. But just having dice is good, and this is still a solid die that you can really build around. And I think the funny thing is, I thought it was going to go in every deck, and then I thought maybe it doesn't go in any decks, and it turns out it still goes in a lot of decks. And I think in a lot of decks that it's currently played in, it still gets played for $1, and I think that's fine. I don't think Force Speed needs to be ubiquitous. It's kind of like Holocron. It's like, I'm building a blue deck. Like, this doesn't really fit my deck. It's a 0-cost upgrade that kind of freaks my opponent out. It's got a focus side. Maybe those extra actions are going to be useful. It's repeatable. Why not? And I'm just not a fan of that sort of mindset. Just make it cost 1. If not a lot of people play it, that's fine. I'm okay with that. Less repeatable action cheating will be fine with me. Alright, so before we move on to a couple other problematic cards we need to address, this is subjective, okay? I said that at the beginning. I'm going to repeat it. This is a subjective opinion of mine that I like Destiny to be, I take an action. It's now your turn. Take an action. Oh, what? Ah, I'm going to take 2 this turn. I'm going to pay $1, play a card. Boom, Tactical Mastery. Now I get a reroll, and I blew you out. Boom. That was cool. That's how I like to play Destiny. I just think having a game where you roll out, you got a Force Speed on a dude, you trigger fast hands to trigger your Force Speed, you get 2 more actions, then you put a Vibro Knife on Ray, now you've got 3 actions, now you activate the other guy, now all your dice are in the pool, you have 2 more actions, you take a reroll, now you resolve, now it's your turn. Like, that doesn't feel like Destiny to me. Like, how are you interacting with that person? What are you doing? What game are you playing now? It almost feels like 2 games of solitaire that get played side by side, or one person's playing solitaire and the other person's still playing Destiny, and they're like, dude, you still get to interrupt all my stuff, and I don't get to touch yours. And I think it's leading oftentimes to these sort of what we're seeing at the Store Champs, whereas we see the players who really want to win are bringing a lot of these decks that I would classify as degenerate, and it's frustrating for the degenerate decks to play against each other. But if you're a more casual player, and you even show up and you go, you know what? I'm not going to win the Store Champ. That's fine. I'm going to have a fun day. And then you run into a Cheating Ray deck, and a Pomaz deck, and a Nines deck, and you're like, you know what? I didn't win, and I knew I wasn't going to, but you know what else? I didn't have any fun today either. That's where I think we're really running into problems, and I think cards like this, more than anything, are scary because we're in set 2. What if we get a couple more in set 3? I mean, this is really constricting design spaces where the game can go. I'd love to see these erratas and changes get made. I know, it'd be big. It'd be big to have this early in the game, this many major changes. I know I'm going to get a lot of hate for this and say, Tiny, You're way over the top here. And by the way, to be clear, I'm not saying the game is completely broken. The game functions fine. What I'm saying is this is not Destiny as was played in Awakenings, and that's what I subjectively enjoyed a lot. And you may disagree. You may think maybe you thought it was boring. You like the speed that's happening in Spirit of Rebellion. But for me personally, I don't love it. All right, so if we're gonna visit cards though, we're gonna say there's a couple cards that need to be fixed. Let's just go ahead and fix the other ones. The first one is ammo belts. Ammo belts should say equipment. It just should. Second chance ammo belt is a problem. The only reason it's not a huge problem is because the speed of the game is so absurdly fast. It's actually hard to string together the money to play second chance and an ammo belt and maybe some upgrades and some removal. And it can be kind of hard to find all of this fast enough. Now, if and when the game does slow down, and maybe it's not going to, maybe ammo belt's going to be fine just because the game is so crazy fast. But if it does slow down, ammo belt is going to become a really big problem with second chance. And right now people say, yeah, just blast through it. Yeah, that's true, you can. But if the game slows down at all, then it's going to become a really big problem. And I say, let's just hit it now, right? It's still cool. You can still do awesome things like, I'm going to thermal detonator you, and you know what? Push the ammo belt aside. Because next turn I'm going to do it again. That's really cool, and I think that's what it's there for, and so that people can't disarm your stuff. So just make it equipment. It still does what it should do, but it takes away that degenerate combination with our beloved second chance. All right, so the last card I want to talk about today is Vibro Knife. I've talked about Vibro Knife a lot in the past, so let's just go over why it is absurdly good. So, first of all, it has ambush, so it works really well with Rey. That's the first thing. Second thing is it makes all your damage unblockable. Third thing, it does not have to be showing damage side to make your damage unblockable. It just has to be hanging out there. Third thing, it has two non-modified sides, so it fixes a lot of those decks that are a little bit dicey, right? Like, oh, I got too many modified sides. You stick a Vibro Knife in there, and it works. Or you just stick a Vibro Knife in there, and it just works on its own because it only has the one modified side. And you get all of this for only 2. So, to be honest, I don't even know what the change is. Like, there's so many things wrong with this card that I don't know what the answer is. Some answers I've come up with are making all the sides modified sides. The problem with that is I don't think we want to errata dice sides. I think that's too hard. It's too annoying to be like, I rolled my die, and your opponent's like, no, that's a +2 now. And they're like, what the heck are you talking about? It's not a +2. I think a more realistic possibility is to either strip away that ability in its entirety, take away ambush, or if we just errata Rey, that ambush becomes way less meaningful, and maybe the card's fine at that point. Another errata could be something like while this die is in your pool and showing a melee damage side. That would be somewhat limiting. It still fits super well with Rey, but at least it doesn't have such a high impact in every other deck. Like, the things you can do that are kind of crazy, like say FN, for example. Like, you play it, you get the free roll with it, you roll it out, it's a blank. Normally you'd be like, oh god, it's an FN, it blanked. But with FN, you can just be like, alright, I'll override the other weapon with my flamethrower, and you have 3 shields, but I've got this blank Vibro Knife, so I'll do 2 or 4 or a riot baton, do 3. It just does so much for the low cost of 2. I realize the damage sides are low, so I can see why designers really packed it in with all this goodness, but it just really is a problem with Rey, especially. With Rey, it's really a problem. And it's also just such a problem because it negates all these cool cards like Force Illusion and Armor Plating that especially something like Armor Plating, you're paying $2 to block 2. That is a stiff cost, and then you're getting nothing. Alright, let's come back around. So, again, I know I'm going to get a lot of flack for this video. Tiny jumping at shadows, Tiny overreacting. And I don't feel like that's what I'm doing here. Like, I'm not saying the game is broken. I'm not saying the game is dying. None of these things are what I'm saying. What I'm saying is our local community is struggling. The realities of the situation are coming down upon us with all these store championships. And I think by fixing both the tournament structure and by eliminating the excess, repeatable action cheating, will really move this game in a positive direction. And maybe I'm wrong. Maybe the game is awesome as it is, and I'm just one of these dudes that's like, I played the game back in my day, and we could only technical mastery. And everything was great then, and now everything's bad because I'm an old man. That's possible. I'm totally open to that. This is a subjective video. If you think I'm wrong, let me know. I am happy to be wrong. But that's where I stand, and I'll see you next time on Tiny Grimes Games.